Well, I'd like to get right into our program because I know that's why many of us were so excited about this event today. And I'd like to introduce, you all may know, but we're very pleased to have with us today Dana Haynes, who's going to serve as our moderator for today's gubernatorial forum. Dana is the editor-in-chief of the Portland Tribune and managing editor of the Pamplin Media Group, where we get I'll get a lot of our local news from. He has 25 years of experience in Oregon newspaper newsrooms as an editor, bureau chief, reporter, and columnist. He's formerly served as a political speechwriter and is the author of 9 mystery and thriller novels. Following about 30 minutes of questioning from our moderator, he's going to open it to take questions from our audience for our gubernatorial candidates. So you can submit your questions in the chat and our co-hosts will pass them on to Dana to ask. So with that said, I'd like to turn it right over to Dana. Thank you very much. And we're excited to hear from our next governor of Oregon.
Well, Chair McGuire, Washington County Democrats, thank you for this opportunity. We really appreciate being here. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Portland Tribune and the managing editor of the Pamplin Media Group, which for Washington County includes papers in Sherwood, Tigard, Tualatin, Beaverton, Hillsborough, Forest Grove, and obviously my Tribune covers part of that area as well. These are Oregon-owned, locally controlled newspapers, and for those of you who care a lot about these issues, I encourage you to support your local media. I also want to say we're working through the remains of the pandemic, working from home with the same challenges as always. Sometime during this debate, you will hear my cat indicate that she has not been fed today. I want you to know this issue, she is not a reliable narrator. Let me get started right away with the questions. We have about 30 minutes. So I'm going to start, if I could, with Tina Kotek. First question out the gate. The two of you can be the Democratic candidates for governor, but if you win, you won't be the Democratic governor. You will be Oregon's governor. How would you work to heal the political divisions in our state? Tina Kotek, would you like to kick that one off?
I would. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dana. And thank you, Patrick, and the entire leadership of the Washington County Dems for having us today. And it's nice to have a sunny Saturday. When I was Speaker of the Oregon House for 9 years, my job was to be a speaker for the entire state. And to that end, I made sure that every member of the legislature could be successful in representing their constituents. We all represent communities across the state, and every Oregonian needs to be successful. One of the things that I helped create dialogue between my colleagues in the House was pairing up House Republicans and House Democrats during the course of the 2-year cycle and saying, go visit each other's districts. In my case, I went and my last one that I did was with Werner Reschke. I went to Klamath Falls and hung out with Representative Reschke. We talked about a whole host of issues and really got an understanding of what it's like. For him, he literally lives almost on the California border in Malin. He came to my district. We went to St. John's, we went to Cully, we went to the different neighborhoods and talked about very similar things, even though maybe some of the solutions might look a little different. That type of dialogue is going to be absolutely necessary. Look, there is no magic wand to create unity in our state, but what it's going to take is hard work, a lot of listening and more listening and lots of dialogue with everyone around the state, because I truly believe, and this is from my years working at Oregon Food Bank, when the entire state is successful, we all are successful and helps us no matter where we live. I'm committed to that, and I'm actually very excited about the idea of spending a lot of time outside of Salem, working with Oregonians in their districts, in their communities to be successfome. So thank you for the opening question.
Tobias Reed.
Thanks, Dana. Thanks, Washington County Democrats. It's good to see all of you. My home county, I appreciate this opportunity as well. One of the things that's great about being a statewide elected official is the chance to connect with people around the state and to do it on a wide range of issues. Assembling a victorious campaign across the state forces you to listen to people you don't agree with, and continuing to pursue those statewide priorities is similar. I'm really proud of the work that we've done on the Elliott Forest as a key example. This is a challenge that's dogged Oregon for decades. And as a result of staying in the work when the headlines aren't there, we've assembled a really groundbreaking solution that's going to be the largest research forest in North America. And I have never been more proud of that kind of a coalition than in this example. I'll never forget the experience of watching a representative from a timber group sit next to a representative from the Portland Audubon Society, one pointing at the other saying, when we started this, I did didn't like him. And I still don't believe very much of what he says, but we've created something here that's going to work. That maybe even more important than the immediate solution is that it's a model for how to take on other big issues. So this is an essential thing, and it's important for us to remember that despite the variety of our backgrounds, the largeness of our geographic state, in the end, all of us want some version of the same kinds of things for our families to be healthy and safe and happy and nearby and have some kind of prospects for a brighter future. When we focus on that, we'll have much more of a chance to build the kind of future that we want. When people walk out of a legislative session, I think we have to look at ourselves and figure out what we've done that creates a situation where people feel like they're better off withdrawing. It's not that we should give anyone all that they want, but we've got to create that process that allows people to say, even if I didn't get what I want, it's better for me and the people that I represent to stay engaged and stay part of the process.
Thank you very much. Local leaders here in Washington County, as well as in Salem, took notice when Intel, our largest employer, decided to invest in a new manufacturing center in Ohio rather than expanding its presence here in Oregon. If we want to retain and add high-tech jobs, what needs to happen on the state level to achieve that? Tobias Reed?
Well, I was really upfront about my disappointment in the way we took that question on. I'm not so naive as to think that we're going to win every kind of competition like that, but I think we need to be in it. I think the governor ought to seek to be on a first name basis with the CEO of Intel. I don't have to tell Washington County that Intel is the largest private sector employer in Oregon, so we should be concerned about the needs of our large employers. Again, it's not something that they should get everything they want, but we've got to be on offense here, making sure that we have the infrastructure in place, making sure that we are clear on what plans are afoot, and being on offense. We've got to recognize that our progressive aspirations are more achievable when we have a growing economy that is well distributed. So there are more jobs, and we can have good debates about what is required for that and what we want from our employers. But I think we all ought to be able to agree that more jobs is better than less. Higher wages are better than lower wages. And being a good partner in trying to create the conditions that are attractive to employers, small and large alike.
Tina Kotek?
Thank you for the question. Well, in my most recent visit to Intel, what I heard from Intel is they will remain committed to Oregon. And as our largest employer, we certainly want to make sure, we continue to build that relationship. What I think we need to do to bring in more manufacturing, and look, we should all be proud. Oregonians make a lot of things. Manufacturing is a very important part of our economy, and not only manufacturing, but R&D, research and design, which is, that is what Intel is doing in Washington County. And they have created an environment, an ecosystem of other people who directly feed into what Intel does and people with technical backgrounds. We want to build on that and to grow our state as a bioscience hub. I mean, Genentech is in Washington County. So we're talking about very technical jobs. So I think there are three things that are really important to retain and attract those type of employers. One is having the workforce that they need. The work we've done to increase $1 billion per year by the Student Success Fund to get more money into our schools to fully fund career and technical education starts that pipeline. But supporting our community colleges and also those skill up programs when someone says, look, I've got a technical background, well, I want to go into, say, bioscience. How do we provide that transitional program to get people into other technical type of jobs? Businesses need they need the workforce that will do this work. And so that is key. I think the work in this past legislature by the governor around her workforce initiative, I think is a great start. And we need to do more there. And I intend to as our next governor. Second of all, I think we really have to continue to work on our housing issue. And I'm sure we're going to be talking about this. But when people bring people to Oregon or try to attract new talent, if they don't have a place to live or a place they can afford, it is not going to work. It's a huge economic challenge for us to maintain our economic vibrancy going forward. So we need to deal with that. And lastly, it is about having those private-public partnerships, having conversations. I agree with the treasurer. The governors ought to be on a first name basis with our largest, CEOs of our largest companies and make sure that we are talking to each other, whether it's transportation or education or whatever that thing that is going to help them grow in our state. We have to have that open line of dialogue and look forward to doing that as our next governor.
Thank you. This is that prototypical day one question. What do you think is the single most important issue Oregonians are facing? As governor, how would you address it on day one? And I have a follow-up question. Tina Kotek?
Well, the number one thing I'm hearing from Oregonians about, no matter where I travel, is housing and homelessness. And I just talked about it and why I think it's an economic security issue for everyone. We need to deal with it. As governor, I'm going to bring more urgency to that issue. I put out my housing and homelessness plan. Day one, create a new initiative to get in and end homelessness for our most vulnerable Oregonians in the next 2 years. That's our vets, our seniors, our families with children, our teens coming out of foster care who don't have a place to live. We can solve that, and we have to help everybody get into permanent housing. We also need to have a day one strategy on building more housing. On day one, I'll issue an executive order that says we need to come up with a 10-year plan to build more housing in Oregon. So for me, top of mind and top issue for me on day one is housing and homelessness.
Tobias Reed?
Homelessness is the largest issue, but I think it's a symptom of a larger problem, which is the lack of follow through to match our good intentions in Oregon. Homelessness is one example, but there are lots of other things where we see time and again of late that Oregon's state government has not been up to meeting the challenge. Our unemployment benefits system fell apart. We weren't able to get rental assistance to people who need it. We've talked about our paid family leave program as something that's a priority, but we haven't been able to implement it. So I think the bigger problem, even apart from that specific example, is how we have to match our good intentions with the execution to deliver results that people want and need.
Here's my follow-up question. What is the single most important issue Oregonians are facing that no one in Oregon is talking about? What's the big surprise issue that keeps you up at night? And Tobias Reed, do you want to kick that one off?
Well, actually, I think I give the same answer that I just did to the first one, because it is such a lack of a disconnect between what we say we want to do and then our willingness to follow through and execute it. One other one that might kind of fit into that category is, I don't know if it counts because some people are talking about it, but not enough people are talking about it, literacy and our early literacy efforts that aren't giving students the strong start that they need, that gives them a chance to live up to their full potential through their academic careers. These early investments can make a huge difference in so many of the other issues that we see turning up and showing up later in life.
Tina Kotek?
Well, I do think people know things aren't working, and that's why we have to get in there and do a better job of making government work. But what I think the one issue that is that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, unless you live in a certain part of the state, but it will affect all of us, is water. It's drought. I was down in Southern Oregon I spent an hour and a half talking with farmers about the issues they're dealing with in their irrigation district and their basin down in the Ashland-Medford area. It's pretty severe. I think we hear about it, but the natural resource industry in Oregon is very important. And we have a water problem, and not just in places you think. And it is going to take a concerted effort to reset how we manage what is a diminishing resource. A lot of people are going to keep moving here. We need to continue to grow. We want to be food secure and have the ability to be resilient and grow our own food here in Oregon. I think that's in danger if we don't get more serious about our water issues here.
Thank you. Democratic efforts to close the loopholes for childhood immunization by removing the non-medical exemptions for school entry have fallen short. Even during the pandemic, lawmakers were unwilling to go there. Where do you stand on this issue? Would you take a lead position on closing these loopholes to cure such curable childhood illnesses as measles, mumps, and rubella? Tina Kotek.
Well, as I think many of you know, I was a child advocate. I was the policy director at Children First for Oregon for several years prior to coming into the legislature. I think immunizations have worked. I was actually on an immunization advisory board. I believe in the science-based schedule that parents are asked to follow to have their kids in school. We should have higher compliance with that. And I think what we've been trying to do in the legislature is provide as many options and as many educational opportunities as possible to help parents get to the decision that this is a safe and healthy decision for their child in the current schedule. So I don't know if we can change it, but what we do have in place, for example, not being able to opt out and talk to until you talk to your primary care provider, I think that's really important. And we have to continue to encourage that, because I do think immunizations work. It's kept generations of kids healthy, and I think it's good science. And we're going to have to continue to raise that awareness and encourage parents to make that safe choice for their child.
Tobias Reed?
I think we should do everything we can to give people a chance to ask questions, but they need to do that of qualified medical professionals, not Facebook and Fox News. And ultimately, yes, I think we should require vaccines. It's how we protect each other. It's how we allow people to continue to be safe in public school, which is one of the very best investments we can make in our common future.
Thank you. So question here, what are the chances we're ever going to see a commuter train between Portland and Salem? And yes, in case you're wondering, my wife, Katie King, asked this question. So Tobias Reed, do you want to kick that one off?
I can't give you a specific answer to that, but I think we have to continue to work on all modes of transportation. Rail is certainly an attractive one. It would have a lot of benefits, and the I-5 corridor would certainly be a strong candidate for that. But I think it speaks to the larger issue of making sure that we're continuing to invest in transportation infrastructure that offers people choices and is part of a system that works together. So that should be part of the long-range plan, certainly, making those kind of transformative investments that have long lives and that can affect really large numbers of people has significant economic benefit. And I think we should certainly consider it and pursue it.
Tina Kotek?
Well, I would have to agree that we will not know how we're going to do this without significant investment from the federal government. It will require, I believe, an additional line in the valley. Right now, both passenger and freight share lines, and it's really important to continue to move product by rail, because more trains, more container cars, less trucks on the road. It's a much better way to move things. So we do have to prioritize that. So it will take significant investments from the federal government. But wouldn't it be awesome to get there? To have the corridor from Eugene up to Seattle be more effective, so we can really have the type of easier transit and less carbon emissions if we're in trains like that. But it will take some time, and certainly open to talking to my colleagues. And as you know, at the Oregon Department of Transportation, we do have a rail division, and they focus on rail safety. But this is got to be the conversation for the future. But we will need money from the federal government to do that. It's a pretty expensive undertaking.
Thank you. And for those of you listening who wonder why the moderator's wife gets her own question, live with it. Is there a role for the governor's office to play regarding the stalled transportation infrastructure projects in our region, including the I-5 bridge replacement project, the I-5 Rose Corridor improvement project, and the Southwest Corridor Max Line, which would serve us right here in Washington County? Tina Kotek?
I'm sorry, Dana was the question, and what's the role of the governor in that?
What is the governor's role on these stalled infrastructure projects?
Right, thank you. Well, I think we have to be able to move things safely and efficiently and effectively. When I hear that businesses in Washington County have to come up with workarounds to get vital product to the airport, we know we have a challenge here. And you live in Washington County. In 2017, I made sure we passed the current transportation package that is, we upgraded 217, we'll be upgrading the Abernathy Bridge. It is funding the improvements in the Rose Corridor. And I do support a replacement of the I-5 bridge. It's absolutely essential that we have a safer infrastructure that is more seismically sound, and hopefully we'll be back on track to do that. We need a regional strategy. Everything has to work together. These aren't standalone projects. And as governor, my role is to make sure I have the best Oregon Transportation Commission possible, that is transparent, that listens to people, that prioritizes accordingly, knows how to maximize the use of the new federal dollars coming through the infrastructure package. And then, the governor is in charge of who runs ODOT, making sure that they are following their intentions. And I really believe in the strategies metro-wide that people are trying to everything keep connected. And that includes safer roads for pedestrians, for bicyclists. We need to get people into other modes of transportation as well. So it is not just about highways. It is an entire system that, as governor, I want to make sure is integrated, and working with our local officials to make it happen.
Tobias Reed.
It's an interesting question. When I think about the experience I had helping to, Oregon did our part when we talked about an interstate bridge some years ago. And as we went through that process, I think we spent a lot of time thinking about what a transportation system is going to look like decades from now. A major project like the interstate bridge requires us to think about that because we don't build those projects very often. The bridges that are there were built in 1917 and 1956, so we got to get it right. And I think the governor's role is largely about convening and leading the conversation so that we're not stuck in the mode of thinking we're just going to expand what we currently have. The transportation system could look vastly different decades from now. It's not that much of a stretch to think about our kids thinking about driving like we do about riding horses, something they could do, but that could be more of a hobby because things are going to look so different. That could have really big impacts on how we think about what transportation infrastructure we need, how we use land, for example. So I think that discussion is something that the governor really needs to lead on, as well as ensuring that a process occurs where people feel like they are heard. It isn't that we're going to get unanimity on any one project, even as we watch 217 and it's in its current state of in the middle of upgrades. Some people are upset by that. But when we have confidence about where we're headed, I think that that can unlock a lot of potential. And I think that's a unique part of the governor's role.
Thank you. New governors quite often ask all their state agency heads to turn in their resignations to start a new slate. Is there an agency right now in the state government that is just doing an absolutely excellent job, and your goal as governor would be to say, don't change a thing, you guys are nailing it? Tobias Reed?
I have to think about that to some extent. Of course, I'd be tempted to say many aspects of the state treasury, but of course, the treasurer is a constitutionally independent office, so a governor does not have the ability to do that. I think the question of asking directors to resign, though, is one that's sort of independent of current performance, and I think that's a mistake that I made when I became treasurer. It's not one that I would make as governor. And it's independent of the individual performance of a person, because I think the governor has the chance to ask in that act whether the people in place share a basic vision of where the incoming governor wants to head. I certainly don't want to be surrounded by yes people, but I do want people on my team who share that basic kind of orientation and commitment. That I think is also sort of part of the reason that we see so many unsatisfactory things in state government right now, because things aren't as well aligned as they could or should be. So I think I would want to do that independently of what I think of any individual agency or person.
Tina Kotek?
I'll start off with the first part of the question about an agency that's doing well. You know, I think I'll first of all, there's a lot of people who work really hard in state government. I think I'll do a shout out to the Parks Department. I know it's not a department people think a lot about, but we were so excited in the legislature last year to finally put some money aside for renovations and upgrades. And I have a lot of confidence in the leadership of the agency director there. And the other reason I'm a big fan of that department is a few years ago, one of my bills was something called the Oregon Main Street Revitalization Program. We were one of the only states that didn't have a small pot of money that could be used for grants for upgrading Main Street buildings across our state. And Park said, you know, they had some small federal granting that they were in charge of, and they're like, we'll take it over. We'll do these grants. Look it up. It's amazing. These grants are going out to these communities who are like, I need an upgrade on this building, or I need some new sidewalks, or some, it's amazing what Oregonians can do. And they're like, I want to have a Main Street that reflects our community and wants people want to go there and spend time there and spend money there. It's super exciting. And I've always found the folks at Parks as being very can-do. They're like, we'll do anything you give us to do. And I really appreciate that. And that's the type of agency I want to see across the board. Look, we have some great leaders, and we have some folks that I think are tired and need to have a hard conversation about whether they want to stick around and whether or not they have an intention that, for me, is providing the management that allows state employees to be innovative, to take risks, to really focus on customer service. And that's a hard thing to do when you're a public servant. You don't want to step out if you feel like no one's going to have your back. as governor, I'm going to demand a lot from my directors, and I'm going to have the back of folks who are like, look, I'm trying to do my job better and differently and more effectively. And why can't we try this or that? I want that type of continuous improvement that I think we've lost. And I'm very excited to be doing that. And I think, we'll have the right agency team. Everyone's going to get reviewed. Everyone's going to have a hard conversation and build on the things that are working, but really improve the things that aren't, because there are some things that really need a serious upgrade.
Thank you. In the public health arena, what did we learn between 2019 and today that will help us weather the next pandemic? Tina Kotek.
Did you say in the public health arena?
Yes.
Sorry. Well, I think what we saw, well, nobody had a playbook when the global pandemic arrived in our lives 2 years ago. I'm really glad a lot of us are walking around today because we followed the science and did the best we could. And I wrote a newsletter day in and day out for weeks at the beginning of the pandemic. And to know that people were doing everything they could to keep each other safe, it's a good place to be in. But there should be systems in place to be prepared, whether it's making sure you have protective equipment or making sure you know which community organization has the relationships and the linguistic capabilities to reach populations of Oregonians who get left out. And we need to take a breath and learn from this pandemic and say, what have we put in place? What is working? And we have been underfunding public health. We were in the midst of modernizing our public health system. We have to stay on track. We've clearly shown that we weren't completely ready for something like a pandemic, but we have learned from this. And I was just down in Medford, and there was a clinic there who hit their 5,000 vaccine shot. Multilingual, reaching the farm worker community. We have really built up capacity to do some really amazing things. We don't want to lose it. We have to maintain it because, we got to be ready for whatever happens next. And so that's my goal, to make sure we learn and improve from what we have experienced in the pandemic.
Tobias Reed.
Let's say a couple of things. One is the importance of workforce and how far we have to go to make sure that public health workforce is adequate and that we're recruiting and retaining well. That plays out in lots of different ways, but we don't have enough in our current pipeline. The second, I think, is the importance of clear and consistent communication. Of course, we were learning about the pandemic, about the virus, and how it worked. And I think Oregonians' capacity, humans' capacity to deal with that uncertainty and that change is significant, but it's not infinite. And being clear with people about how things would have to change as we learned more would allow us to extend that capacity. I admit that I was pretty frustrated when we saw bars and restaurants open, but schools not. So being clear about what our priorities are, even as we learn things, I think allows us to be consistent and to have more people able to participate in that common mission.
Thank you. A recent Econ Northwest report found a significant reduction in single-family rental properties over the last 5-year period. It was 14% down in Portland, but it's 11% down in the metro area, which includes Washington County here. Is there a state role in trying to fix this problem about the slipping lack of rental properties? Is it time to reassert the state's previous dominance over landlord-tenant operations, or should this remain local decisions? Tobias Reed?
Well, I think we can clearly agree that that this is part of the challenge around affordable housing that contributes to the homelessness issue that we're so concerned about. So I think more solutions, more flexible solutions that are going to look different in different parts of the state is an essential part of the equation. And adding more tools. The state has financing tools that not every local community has, and we should be deploying those in all kinds of flexible ways. The fact that supply is down is certainly related to cost. We've got to get faster at the processes that precede people building new homes for rent, single family, multifamily, and I think we have a role to make sure that we're pursuing everything that has a chance to speed up the increase of supply. There's a big gap, and unless we improve, that gap is going to continue to grow.
Tina Kotek?
Thank you for the question. The reduction, first of all, we have to make sure everyone has an affordable place to live. And we are stuck in a situation where a lot of people want to live here and keep moving here, and maybe not as many as they were in the previous decade, but we have a housing supply crisis. In the reduction in number of rentals that are single family standalone homes, I mean, that is really, kind of an indicator of the market when it is financially advantageous to no longer be in the rental market because you can get such a return on your investment to sell your home. And also, I think people are still picking up properties as real estate investments and sitting on them for a while. So there's a lot of things going on in the market. For me, it's making sure we have more housing options within the urban growth boundary. That's why I passed the bill in 2019 to make sure we have other options instead of single family standalone homes and big multifamily apartments. You need other options. You need to be able to build duplexes and triplexes and cottage cluster apartments, other types of housing options within the UGB, including ADUs, that will provide more affordable options and allow us to live within our land use system that we all love and cherish, but provide more opportunities, not only for home purchase, but for rental. So that's going to take some time, but on day one, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to issue an executive order and say, let's start a process to come up with a 10-year plan to get everybody involved to build more housing. And it's going to take all of us to do that. That's a new workforce. That's a streamlining and reducing of red tape on how we do permitting. And it's a conversation about how do we balance the land use laws we love and the need for additional housing in our communities. And that's what's really driving the changes in the market. Is it's a great deal to sell your house right now and not be in the rental market. And that has caused a lot of challenges.
We are at the 30-minute mark for my questions, the questions that came from my cohorts at the Portland Tribune and the Pamphlet Media Group and my wife. And now we're going to take some questions from the audience. The first question that we got from the audience was, Phil Knight donated $1 million to Senator Betsy Johnson, who's running as an independent for governor. How can we, and I'm assuming the we in that sentence is Democrats, counter her $5 million campaign fund to get our Democratic candidate elected, Tina Kotek?
Well, first of all, I believe in campaign contribution limits. I supported them in the Oregon legislature. I supported sending a constitutional change to voters, which was approved, to allow for campaign contribution limits as making them allowable under our free speech rules in our state. And I think you're seeing the consequence of folks who can put $1 million into a candidate and do that over and over again, and what that means for, I think, voters' confidence in our democratic system. So the other thing I would say is people need to take Betsy Johnson very seriously. I don't think she's in line with the values of folks who are attending today. But she will have a lot of money because we don't have limits. And it's going to take money and enough people power to make sure a Democrat wins in November. And I hope you're all ready for the work. We all have to put it in.
Tobias Reed?
I also support campaign contribution limits. I don't think it's a panacea, but it is definitely something that we should pursue. And it is going to take a multi-pronged effort in November for the Democratic nominee to come out on top. I think that's why it's important to have someone who has that experience being on a ballot statewide and assembling the diverse coalitions that it takes to win in a multi-party candidate. But in the meantime, we have people on our side, and all of the people who are here and many others have the ability to connect with their friends, family, neighbors, and Oregonians throughout the state to make clear the contrasts in values and priorities that Senator Johnson has with our party.
Thank you. With some specifics, what is your plan to work with President Joe Biden to fulfill the Build Back Better package of bills, Tobias Reed?
I think we have to look at the role that the state plays. In a lot of cases, the programs that the federal government runs are implemented and delivered by the state. So being in a position to fulfill those intents, to have the capacity, to have the flexibility, the agility, the capacity in our state agencies to deliver those programs is central. I think there's a really interesting conversation that continues to go on in Congress about whether it is better to have wide range of programs and demonstrate them with a shorter time frame through the budgetary challenges and mechanics that result, or to be focused on a few things and have them paid for permanently. And I'm of the opinion that I think we can do more by focusing on the things that really matter to Oregonians in their everyday lives, and making sure that they are paid for and not subject to congressional sort of budget mechanics that put us in the spot of having those things expire later on. We saw really tremendous things with the child care credit and helping lift kids out of poverty. But to see that the promise of that removed because of those budgetary mechanics is really disappointing. So I'd like us to focus on those things that can really make a difference, and do that in a sustainable way, and have Oregon in a place that we can be effective partners in delivering those programs.
Tina Kotek?
Well, I look forward to working with President Biden, but as someone who has been an advocate for a long time, I've been doing this work when there was a Republican or a Democrat. What it takes is advocacy to our partners in Washington, D.C. to make sure they don't forget about Oregon, make sure that we are ready when money does flow our way, but to be part of the conversation on how these investments get structured, working strongly with our congressional delegation. We have an amazing group of folks, and we'll have one more in our delegation with the new district. Working with them hand in hand and having a strong presence in Washington, D.C., working in partnership with our colleagues is going to be very important to me. But until we get Build Back Better, and we do need it, whether it's the climate investments, the early childhood investments, the care workforce investments for folks who work in long-term care facilities, we need all of those investments. If we're really going to get to that next level of service and taking care of folks the way we all want to do it, Oregon government has to be ready. We're in the process of creating a new early learning division, making sure that they are standing ready at the end of this biennium to be ready for whatever early childhood investments come from the federal government, making sure that what we've put in place with the governor's executive order stays in place as it relates to climate, making sure the agencies are ready, that when things change, that we have plans and we know what to do right away when new dollars are flowing. Nothing is more frustrating than have people say, oh, we just got a bunch of money. What are we going to do with it? We have to be ready, because when it happens, we don't want to wait. We want to get things in the pipeline, and including making sure our long-term care workers are supported. There's professional development. They get paid better. I want to make sure that when someone needs care, that they have a trained and well-compensated workforce. That's what Build Back Better is going to bring to Oregon. And I will make sure we are ready when that money comes.
Thank you. The third question comes from the audience. How will you make Oregon's government more effective? We have many good plans, but their execution is often flawed by failure to fit into an integrated long-range plan, by computer or website problems, and by a lack of effective implementation. Tina Kotek, wanted to address that one?
Yeah, it's one of the main reasons I'm running. I've worked on a lot of things as your speaker. What is really important is make sure when we promise we're going to do something, it gets done. You can pass all the legislation in the world, but you need a governor and executive agencies that can follow through. And what it's going to take is oversight. It's going to take, okay, we have a plan. This plan says this is what our goal is going to be. How are we going to get there? What's the timeline? What investment do you need? How much staff do you need? Do you need new staff? Do you need differently trained staff? It's that level of detail that me and my team will get into with our agency directors. I'm excited about making sure our executive side of state government is as high functioning as possible. Oregonians deserve good customer service. They need to know when things aren't working well, that you own up to it and say, that's not okay. It was entirely unacceptable that unemployment benefits could not get out the door. That could have been different. It should have been different. We have to learn from our mistakes. I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking back. I'm going to be looking forward, but we do need to be informed by the idea that some stuff's not working. That means management, that means oversight and accountability. And I'm excited about doing that, because I just want to make sure that people can get what they need. That is why I'm in this. I want to make sure that government functions in a way that people feel heard and helped when they need the help.
Tobias Reed?
I think one of the best ways to predict someone's future performance is to look at what they have done in the past. And that in that vein, I'm really proud of what we've done with Oregon Saves. This is the opt-out retirement program that Oregon has created before anyone else in the country, and we did it at Treasury. 5 years in, we have 115,000 people who have funded IRAs, $150 million collectively saved. That's because we were diligent and we were iterative. We worked with our partners in the private sector. We worked with savers. We went back and forth to get things better, as light a touch as possible for employers and providers, as pleasant an experience as possible for savers. That's what's resulted in increased public support. When we went back to the legislature for a couple of tweaks, we heard from our partners, from employer groups, that ours was the model for how labor-related legislation ought to be implemented. That's the approach that I want to take to execution, by being clear about metrics and by holding people accountable. The questioner is right to point out to that mismatch between our good intentions and our lack of follow through. And I think that is what we see in people's dissatisfaction, that voters are not happy right now. And we have to pay attention to that, or we risk losing the governor's seat in November.
Another question then from the audience, and this is a bit of a follow-up. I didn't hear either candidate talk about the absolute failure of the software for people to apply for COVID relief. They go on to say, and unemployment benefits, but we did touch on it briefly. Is that fixed for the next time? Tobias Reed.
Well, whatever the answer is for right now, I don't think that it's an answer that can be depended on over time. The nature of infrastructure, and electronic infrastructure particularly, is such that we have to be paying attention constantly and looking for the upgrades, and paying attention. Something that seems like it's okay right now is not necessarily going to have the same experience when we encounter a surge. That's a big part of what we saw in the unemployment benefit system, and we have to be looking ahead at what might be coming. I'm really proud. Another example of that, we just opened a new Treasury building in Salem that is the first building in Oregon that has a platinum rating from the Seismic Resilience Council. People don't necessarily think of Treasury as an essential function in the wake of a natural disaster, but I'm here to tell you it is. We have to be able to move money around. And so even though the facilities that we had were adequate, sort of, for where we were, we wanted to take the opportunity to be prepared. And so now Treasury will be able to work through a Cascadia event and lots of other things because we're thinking ahead. That kind of infrastructure, whether it's physical or electronic, needs to be part of the planning well in advance of whatever challenge that we might see.
Gina Kotek.
I think anytime you say you're going to do something, it takes oversight. As speaker, one of the things that was a top priority for me when the pandemic started was making sure no one lost their housing. So that's why we fought for the eviction moratorium. And then we argued for a safe harbor while people were waiting for rent assistance because there were challenges. But if you're speaking directly, when you say COVID relief, we're talking about rent assistance. I want to make sure it is better the next time we try to move hundreds of millions of dollars through a very new and clunky system. I'm going to tell you the upside. Up until the pandemic, there was not a website where any Oregonian could go to apply for rent assistance. You had to go to multiple agencies around the state to figure out how to get in the queue. But did we execute it well? No. Did we have the right conversation when they're like, trust us, we have this application, and us in the legislature were like, that application doesn't work. And it was 20 some million pages. It actually wasn't that long. It was 26 pages, but it was very hard for people to use. It's gotten reworked, and we will continue to rework it and make sure when we have this type of issue in the future, you need a streamlined way to serve people. The technology is there, but it wasn't set up right. And that, as a legislator, I could do only so much. I could ask, I could prod, it takes the governor to make sure that the next time rent assistance is moving through an online portal like that, it's being moved well and efficiently. We still have people waiting right now, and that's not okay to me. We need to make sure people get their back rent paid, even if they're in the grace period. That is not okay. The other thing I would say is in the legislature, we learned from this pandemic and said, you know what? Our emergency management infrastructure is not set up right. There are all reasons why it looks the way it is. It did. Now we're back to having an Office of Emergency Management that will be the point. So we don't have multiple groups trying to figure out what to do when there's a major emergency. We will be streamlining that. We are funding it. And as governor, I'm going to make sure that's working, because whether we like it or not, something's going to happen in the future. Let's make sure we're better prepared than when we were at the beginning of the pandemic.
Thank you. Another question from the audience. Every county in Oregon is considered a child care desert. That is to say, a community with more than 3 children for every child care slot. What solutions do you have for turning this around so people can get back to work while knowing that children are in high quality, affordable childcare? Tina Kotek.
Yeah. Childcare is a huge issue. Just down in Bend, I think the treasurer was as well. They have a significant desert there. Too many people moving there, very growing community, no childcare. And you know what's happening on the ground is the Chamber of Commerce is working with OSU with Cascades, working with the community college, working with the Head Starts and the providers there, the childcare resource and referral networks, and they're coming up with a plan. So I think it's a great model for us to follow in other places, but it will take the state being a strong partner with resources, particularly on workforce, making sure we have the early childhood workforce through better compensation, better professional development that will be there to provide the services that working families need. Again, going back to Build Back Better, having the additional early learning resources from the federal government to expand what we can pay people and provide more capacity in communities for whether it's infant toddler care, after school care, swing times care. We need a lot more options for our families. And I've been working on childcare issues before I got in the legislature. This is a unique opportunity to actually make significant progress. We're going to have a standalone agency that works on early childhood. I can't be more excited about this. And as Dana pointed out, there's a lot of need. I'm feeling like we're finally going to get ahead of this issue, and it would be really nice to have Build Back Better to, bring us over the top.
Tobias Reed.
Well, this is personal for me. Our daughter right now is at a soccer game. Our son's at a baseball game. I say this because as soon as we're done here, I'm going to leave quickly to get over to that baseball game. I know it's personal for other people who are here too. I saw Mayor Beatty's coworker on screen a little bit earlier. This is a struggle that anyone with kids or kids they care about in their life is familiar with. And we obviously have to do a lot more to connect the disparate parts of people that are involved in this question. When I was in Bend, we talked not only with providers in the traditional sense you might have in mind, but others, the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA. It is in the City Parks and Rec Department. It is going to take all kinds of entities being part of this. And the financial investments that we need to make are not only important, they're really good investments. I can say this as the chief investment officer for the state. Getting people, young people, the chance to have that strong start is essential. It does matter to pay people well. It matters that there's a pipeline and a career path for people in this industry, that they are treated with the respect that they deserve, and that the importance that industry holds is recognized. The state also can play an important role in making that process easier. We heard really compelling stories about the frustration that providers have with different interpretations of state rules around building codes, for example, about how hard it is to start a child care facility. So the state has, I think, an important role in making that easier, more efficient, and ultimately making sure that dollars are in place to help make it easier for people to have access to affordable and accessible care.
Thank you. We are at the 15-minute mark, but these questions are so darn good that Chair McGuire, if you don't mind, I'm going to take us right up to the hour. You guys can yank my audio if you disagree, but I think these questions are awfully good. Here's the next one. Thank you. Here's the next one, and I'm going to modify it a little bit. Just as the question that came from the audience is, do you think we can reach those in Oregon who see yes as opposition? Can we work with groups like Timber Unity to close that distance? I want to change this a little bit to say, what is your plan for working with Timber Unity? Tobias Reed.
Is to show up with humility and to listen. I certainly have a lot of different, I think, a lot of different values and interpretations than folks who align themselves with Timber Unity. But that's the point of showing up and listening, because I am convinced, however naive it might be, that I think we can find some common ground. And I go back to that experience with the Elliott Forest as an example to suggest that we can we can find places where we have common interests. My sense is that folks in Timber Unity are concerned about their economic security, about the communities in which they were raised. A lot of people, I think, are motivated by the feeling that there aren't opportunities for them in the communities where they were raised or where they built their life, and we can find other ways to do that. I'm excited about changing the conversation about the climate catastrophe from one where we all have to sacrifice, although there is some of that, to places where we can have economic benefit as well. Compensating forest owners, landowners, ranchers for increasing the carbon content of their soil or the carbon content of the forest that they manage. I think there are potential there are ways to invite people who feel like they are not part of the conversation into the conversation and give them a chance to help shape our future. So in the end, I think it is an intentional effort to show up and break down barriers that are perceived to be in our way.
Tina Kotek.
Well, as governor, I think it's important to be welcoming and listen to everyone and engage with everyone. If people are respectful and want to be part of the process, I will always have an open door. I have had personal conversations with one of the founding members of Timber Unity. As we went into the 21 session, I spoke with him and was trying to understand, 2019 and 2020 were hard as it related to the climate legislation. How do we work better? And what I heard was making sure people are consulted, feel like they're part of the conversation, making sure it's transparent. One of the things that happened, one of the pluses of the pandemic, if there are any, is that we changed our ability to take remote testimony at the legislature, which I think has transformed the breadth and depth of folks from around the state who can be part of a public process when we're in legislative session. But it has to be more than that. Let's face it. For those of us who believe and are passionate about climate change and because it's here, it's affecting us, and ironically enough, really affecting more rural communities than, say, an urban community in terms of because of the work they do, right? Ag and forest and timber communities. We have to make sure that this is a win-win for the whole state. We can't lose urgency, but we have to make sure that everyone feels like there's going to be a benefit for my community. And I think we've not done a great job talking about that, talking about why at the end of the day, moving to 100% clean electricity by 2040 is going to benefit every community. So we got to get out of our traditional talking points. We got to get in community. We got to sit down and say, look, we all believe things are hard, right? You're seeing drought, you're seeing heat waves, you're seeing wildfire. How do we work together to make sure we can make this a little less harmful over time? Because the sooner we start and the sooner we have those conversations, we can get started on something that is going to take some time for all of us to change, to make sure we can protect not only Oregon, but the country and the world from what is happening because of the carbon pollution all over the world. So I feel it as an opportunity. But I will say this, I think it's important, whether it's left or right, that extremism has to be very much monitored and called out. Extremism that results in any kind of people feeling threatened or violence is not okay. It's not part of the dialogue. But I'll listen to anybody who wants to have a respectful conversation in a way that makes sure people get what they need. Because we have to put our political ideologies aside and make sure people get help and make sure the things we love, our environment and our planet, the things that sustain us, are protected. And that is going to take deep, sincere, authentic conversations with everybody in this state.
We are at the 1 hour mark. I'm going to hand this back over to Chair McGuire.